Japan is in chaos today. The impact of the typhoon is triggering sudden flash floods in Tokyo and surrounding regions. The relentless deluge of Typhoon Fakshai transformed the landscape of Okazaki Prefecture and beyond into a surreal, almost apocalyptic scene. The rain, which had begun as a steady patter in the early hours of September 5, 2025, evolved into a ceaseless torrent that seemed to defy nature itself. The air was thick with moisture, carrying the scent of wet earth and the metallic tang of storm-driven winds. The sky, shrouded in dense, roiling clouds, cast an eerie twilight over the region, even at midday. The world outside seemed to blur into a singular, unending cascade of water, as if the heavens had opened a floodgate that refused to close. In Okazaki City, the situation grew increasingly dire as the hours ticked by. The evacuation orders issued at 11:40 a.m. for 746 households and 1,822 people in the Jopan Higashi, Jopan Minami, Mera, and Shimoyama school districts were a stark reminder of the storm's potential for destruction. The Level 4 alert, signaling the immediate risk of landslides, sent a ripple of fear through communities already battered by the unrelenting downpour. Families hurried to comply, gathering what they could carry: photo albums, identification papers, a change of clothes, while the wail of sirens pierced through the roar of the storm. Elderly residents, some leaning on canes or the arms of younger relatives, shuffled toward designated shelters, their faces etched with a mix of resignation and dread. Children, too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, clung to their parents, their small hands gripping stuffed animals or blankets, as if these familiar objects could ward off the chaos. The streets of Okazaki, once bustling with the rhythms of daily life, were now rivers in their own right. National Highway 1, a critical lifeline connecting the city to neighboring regions, remained closed in both directions near Nakota in Yahagi town. Its asphalt submerged under a churning expanse of muddy water. The closure, announced at 1:05 p.m., was not just a logistical inconvenience, but a symbol of the storm's ability to sever connections. Delivery trucks, ambulances, and personal vehicles were stranded, their drivers peering through rain-streaked windshields, weighing the risks of proceeding against the uncertainty of waiting. The underground drainage systems, designed for more predictable rains, were overwhelmed, sending water surging back to the surface in geysers that erupted from manholes and storm grates. The city seemed to groan under the weight of the water, its infrastructure tested to the breaking point. Beyond Okazaki, the typhoon's wrath was felt across a wide swath of Japan. In Yuga City, the overflow from the mountains turned streets into raging torrents, sweeping away anything not bolted down. Residents, caught off guard by the speed of the flooding, scrambled to protect their homes. Sandbags, hastily stacked at doorways, proved futile as water found every crevice, seeping into living rooms and kitchens, soaking tatami mats and wooden floors. The protective sheets draped over rooftops, meant to shield homes from the rain, flapped violently in the wind, some tearing free and cartwheeling through the air like ghostly kites. The sound of the storm was omnipresent, a cacophony of pounding rain, howling winds, and the occasional crash of debris colliding with buildings or trees. In Jeria City, Gifu Prefecture, the heavy rain and flood warnings painted a grim picture. The streets, already slick with water, became treacherous as gutters overflowed, sending waves of debris-laden water cascading through neighborhoods. Bicycles, left chained to racks or abandoned in haste, were carried off by the current, tumbling end over end until they lodged against fences or sank into the muck. Residents waded through knee-deep water, their umbrellas turned inside out by gusts that seemed to come from every direction. The storm's ferocity was indiscriminate, sparing neither urban centers nor rural hamlets. In agricultural areas, the sight of flooded rice fields was a devastating blow to farmers already struggling with unpredictable weather patterns. The water, murky with sediment, swallowed crops that had taken months to cultivate, leaving behind a desolate expanse that shimmered like a lake under the gray sky. The Japan Meteorological Agency's warnings of record-breaking rainfall were no exaggeration. In Miyagi Prefecture, the report of 100 millimeters of rain in a single hour was a staggering statistic, but its real-world implications were even more profound. Rivers, swollen beyond their banks, roared with a ferocity that drowned out all other sounds. Bridges, some centuries old, trembled under the pressure of the rising water, their stone and steel supports tested by forces they were never designed to withstand. In rural areas, farmland became unrecognizable, transformed into vast muddy lakes dotted with the remnants of crops and farm equipment. The sight was heartbreaking for those whose livelihoods depended on the land, yet there was no time for mourning, as the immediate need for safety took precedence. In Nagoya and Kumano City, Mie Prefecture, the rain's intensity waxed and waned, but never ceased entirely. Just after 3 a.m., the downpour in Aichi Ward, Saijo City, grew so fierce that it seemed to hammer the ground into submission. Large raindrops struck with such force that they created tiny craters in the saturated soil, sending up sprays of water like miniature explosions. Trees, their roots loosened by the relentless soaking, swayed precariously, some snapping under the strain of the wind. The sound of branches cracking and falling added to the storm's ominous symphony, a reminder of nature's raw power. The linear rain band forecast, issued for 16 prefectures, was a rare and sobering declaration. It signaled that the storm's reach extended far beyond its core, pulling in moist air that fueled heavy downpours even in regions hundreds of kilometers away. In Tohoku, the risk of flooding grew as rivers swelled, their waters creeping closer to residential areas. The Japan Meteorological Agency's repeated calls for vigilance underscored the storm's unpredictability. Typhoon Fakshai was not a localized event, but a sprawling, multifaceted disaster that tested the resilience of communities across Japan. In Kimitsu City, drone footage captured the surreal beauty of the destruction, a glistening, waterlogged landscape where streets and homes seemed to dissolve into one another. The reflection of emergency lights on the flooded surfaces created an eerie, almost otherworldly glow, as if the city were caught in a dreamlike state between reality and chaos. Workers in Hidano City, Kanagawa Prefecture, fought a losing battle against the elements, their shovels and hands no match for the relentless flow of water. Drainage grates, clogged with leaves and debris, became choke points that exacerbated the flooding, turning streets into shallow rivers that lapped at storefronts and homes. Hakone, a popular tourist destination known for its serene hot springs and views of Mount Fuji, was unrecognizable. The pier at Lake Ashi, usually a picturesque spot for visitors, was battered by waves that crashed against the shore. With such force, that they blurred the line between lake and land. Hotels, filled with stranded travelers, became makeshift shelters, their lobbies crowded with people clutching soggy. As the day wore on, the storm's impact on infrastructure became increasingly apparent. Power outages spread like a contagion, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. The thick storm clouds blocked out the sun, creating an oppressive gloom that made it feel like night even in the early afternoon. Families gathered around battery-powered lanterns, their faces illuminated by the flickering light as they listened to the rain's relentless drumming. Cell phone reception, spotty at best, became a lifeline for those trying to check on loved ones or follow updates from authorities. Train stations, usually hubs of activity, were eerily quiet, their platforms empty save for stranded passengers who sat on benches or leaned against walls, their plans upended by the suspension of rail services. Emergency services were pushed to their limits. In Okazaki, firefighters and rescue teams responded to a flood of calls, from reports of stranded vehicles to homes inundated with water. In one harrowing incident, rescuers waded through chest-deep water to reach an elderly couple trapped in their home. The couple's faint voices, calling from a second-floor window, guided the team through the murky floodwaters. The rescuers' shouts of reassurance carried over the roar of the storm, a small beacon of hope in an otherwise dire situation. In other areas, inflatable boats navigated streets turned into canals, their crews scanning for signs of life amidst the debris. The storm's impact on rivers and embankments was a growing concern. In multiple prefectures, officials monitored water levels with a sense of urgency, knowing that a breach could spell catastrophe. Gauges along riverbanks ticked upward, each increment a reminder of the delicate balance between safety and disaster. In agricultural regions, the flooding of rice fields was not just a loss of crops, but a threat to entire communities whose economies revolved around farming. Farmers, their faces weathered by years of toil, stood helplessly at the edges of their fields, rain streaming down their faces as they watched their livelihoods vanish beneath the water. Landslides, triggered by the saturated hillsides, added another layer of danger. In mountainous areas, the ground gave way with terrifying suddenness, sending torrents of mud, rocks, and trees crashing down. Roads were buried, cutting off access to remote communities. Homes perched near slopes were engulfed, their residents caught unaware as the earth moved beneath them. Rescue teams, hampered by blocked routes, relied on helicopters to survey the damage and locate survivors. The whir of rotor blades became a faint but persistent sound in the storm's cacophony, a reminder that help was trying to reach those in need. The psychological toll of Typhoon Fakshai was as profound as its physical destruction. In evacuation centers, families huddled on gymnasium floors, their belongings reduced to what they could carry. The sound of rain pounding on the roof was a constant reminder of the storm's presence, its rhythm both lulling and menacing. Children, restless and frightened, tried to find comfort in games or sleep, while adults sat in tense silence, their thoughts consumed by worry for their homes and futures. The shared uncertainty bound them together, yet each family carried its own private fears. Would their house still stand? Would their possessions survive? Would life ever return to normal? As night fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. Regions that had hoped to escape the worst of the typhoon found themselves under siege as rain bands swept across the country. Streams, once gentle and meandering, swelled into raging torrents, their waters breaching banks and flooding neighborhoods unaccustomed to such inundation. Residents described the surreal experience of watching their streets transform, the familiar contours of their communities erased by the relentless water. In some areas, the ground itself seemed to dissolve, as if the storm were intent on reshaping the very landscape. The human spirit, however, flickered amidst the chaos. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing supplies and offering words of encouragement. Volunteers in unaffected areas began organizing relief efforts, collecting food, blankets, and clothing for those displaced by the storm. Social media, where reception allowed, buzzed with messages of support and offers of aid, a digital lifeline connecting communities torn apart by the typhoon. In one small act of defiance against the storm's gloom, a group of children in an evacuation center began singing, their voices rising above the rain's relentless drone, a reminder that hope could persist even in the darkest moments. Yet the storm's grip remained unyielding. Meteorologists warned that Typhoon Fakshai's path would bring it closest to the Kanto region by the afternoon of the 5th, a forecast that sent a fresh wave of anxiety through the densely populated area. The region, home to millions, braced for the worst. Schools and businesses already shuttered, prepared for extended closures. Hospitals, running on backup generators, prioritized critical patients, their staff working tirelessly under the strain of limited resources. The storm's expansive reach meant that even areas far from its core were not spared, as rain bands and high winds swept across the country, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. In Okazaki, the closure of National Highway 1 continued to disrupt the flow of supplies and emergency services. The road, a vital artery, was now a barrier, its flooded lanes a testament to the storm's power. Delivery drivers, unable to proceed, parked their trucks on higher ground, their cargo of food and medical supplies tantalizingly out of reach. Emergency vehicles, their sirens drowned out by the wind, navigated alternate routes where possible, but many were forced to wait out the worst of the flooding. Residents, cut off from essential services, relied on their own resourcefulness, sharing what little they had with those in greater need. The storm's impact on transportation extended beyond roads. Train services, a backbone of Japan's infrastructure, remained suspended across multiple regions. Stations, usually alive with the comings and goings of commuters, were now quiet, their platforms slick with rain and littered with abandoned umbrellas. Travelers, stranded and uncertain, sought shelter in station waiting rooms or nearby buildings, their plans derailed by the storm's unrelenting advance. The suspension of services was not just a logistical challenge, but a symbol of the typhoon's ability to disrupt the rhythms of daily life, leaving entire communities in limbo. As the night deepened, the rain continued its assault, its intensity waxing and waning, but never fully relenting. In some areas, the sound of the storm was punctuated by the crack of thunder, a reminder that the typhoon was not just a force of water, but of raw, untamed energy. Lightning illuminated the sky in brief, blinding flashes, casting the flooded landscape in stark relief. For those huddled in shelters or their homes, each flash was a moment of clarity, revealing the extent of the destruction before plunging the world back into darkness. The resilience of Japan's people, honed by centuries of living with natural disasters, shone through in small but significant ways. In Okazaki, a group of volunteers braved the rain to distribute food and water to evacuation centers, their efforts a quiet rebuke to the storm's chaos. In Yuga City, residents worked together to clear debris from drainage systems, their hands raw and cold, but their determination unshaken. In Hakone, hotel staff turned their establishments into safe havens, offering warmth and comfort to stranded travelers who had come seeking relaxation but found themselves caught in a crisis. Yet the storm's toll was undeniable. Homes were lost, livelihoods threatened, and lives upended. The flooded fields, buried roads, and toppled trees were not just physical losses, but symbols of the fragility of human endeavors in the face of nature's fury. The psychological weight of the storm lingered, a shadow over communities that would need weeks, if not months, to recover. The uncertainty of what lay ahead, how long the rain would last, how deep the damage would run, hung heavy in the air, as palpable as the moisture that saturated every surface. As Typhoon Fakshai continued its march across Japan, its legacy was already being written in the stories of those who endured it. The elderly couple rescued from their flooded home, the farmers watching their fields vanish, the children singing in the evacuation center, all were part of a tapestry of resilience and loss. The storm, with its relentless rain and punishing winds, was a force of nature that tested the limits of human endurance. Yet in its wake, it also revealed the strength of communities bound together by shared struggle, their determination to rebuild a quiet but powerful counterpoint to the storm's roar. And still, the rain fell, a ceaseless reminder that the story of Typhoon Fakshai was far from over. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more updates.